The cargo manifest didn't match reality, and that made Rebecca Stone nervous. She floated through the Meridian's hold, her magnetic boots clicking softly against the deck plating as she counted containers. 47 crates of medical supplies bound for the Centauri colonies. 12 tons of processed titanium for the station at Ross 154. Everything accounted for, everything legal, everything routine. Yet her gut screamed that something was wrong. "Captain, we've got company." Raymond's voice crackled through her headset. The xenobiologist sounded confused rather than alarmed. 3 vessels just dropped out of jump space. They're not broadcasting standard approach vectors. Rebecca pulled herself up the access ladder, moving hand over hand toward the bridge. Through the viewport, she could see them now. Sleek ships with hulls that seemed to shimmer with colors she didn't have names for. Not human vessels. Not even close. "Hail them," she ordered, settling into her command seat. Standard greeting protocols. The response came fast, too fast. A face appeared on the main screen, crystalline and angular, refracting light in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Rebecca had seen exactly 3 alien species in her 15 years flying cargo routes through human-controlled space. This wasn't one of them. Human vessel Meridian. The being spoke in perfect English, though its mouth didn't move in sync with the words. "I am Chorus, representative of the Galactic Assembly. You will reduce velocity and prepare to receive an official notice." Rebecca exchanged glances with Raymond, who had pulled up a database search on his console. Nothing. No record of any Galactic Assembly in human files. "We're happy to cooperate," Rebecca said carefully. "Though I have to admit, we weren't expecting company out here." "Expectation is irrelevant," Chorus replied. "What follows is inevitable." The transmission shifted. Legal text scrolled across the screen in 20 different languages, including several human ones. Rebecca scanned the words, her blood turning cold as she processed their meaning. Protocol 17. Total isolation. Incompatible with galactic civilization. "This is a joke," Raymond whispered behind her. "It has to be." But Chorus's crystalline face showed no humor, no emotion at all. "The Galactic Assembly has existed for 11,000 standard years. In that time, we have evaluated 462 species for membership. Humanity is the 73rd to be rejected." Rebecca found her voice. "Rejected? We've barely made contact with anyone. We haven't even applied for membership in anything. Your application was implicit in your expansion beyond your home system," Chorus explained with the patience of someone reciting established law. "The Assembly monitored your development for 3 generations. Your species demonstrates excessive emotional volatility, unpredictable decision-making patterns, and dangerous levels of individual autonomy. These traits are incompatible with civilized society." "Dangerous?" Rebecca felt anger rising in her chest. "We've done nothing but trade peacefully. We've respected every boundary, followed every protocol we knew about." "Your ignorance of proper protocols demonstrates the problem," Chorus said. "Civilized species develop within established frameworks. Humanity developed in isolation, creating systems that cannot integrate with galactic standards. The Assembly has therefore enacted quarantine measures." The legal text continued scrolling. "No human vessels permitted at any of 847 member worlds. No access to established jump gate networks. No participation in galactic trade. No diplomatic contact. Humanity was being walled off from the rest of the universe as effectively as if they'd never left Earth at all." "How long?" Rebecca asked. "How long does this quarantine last?" "Until humanity demonstrates compatibility," Chorus replied, "or ceases to exist as a distinct civilization. The Assembly is patient." Raymond made a choking sound. Rebecca gripped the armrests of her chair hard enough that her knuckles turned white. "You're condemning us for being different," she said quietly. "We are protecting civilization from chaos," Chorus corrected. "The decision is final. You're the last human vessel that will receive direct contact. All others will be turned away at the boundaries of civilized space. You will return to your home system and inform your governments of this decision." The screen went dark. The three alien ships began moving away, their jump drives already charging with a hum that Rebecca could feel through the Meridian's hull. "Captain," Raymond's voice was small. "What do we do?" Rebecca stared at the empty space where the ships had been. Somewhere out, there was a galaxy full of wonders, technologies, and civilizations that humanity would never see. Or rather, would never be allowed to see. The doors had slammed shut before humans even knew they existed. She thought about Earth, about the colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter, about the stations scattered through a dozen systems, all built with human sweat and ingenuity, about the children growing up dreaming of stars that were now forbidden territory. "We go home," she said finally, "and we tell them the truth." The jump back to Earth took 3 weeks. Rebecca spent most of that time writing her report, trying to find words that would convey the magnitude of what had happened. Humanity had reached for the stars and been slapped down by forces they never knew existed. When the Meridian finally docked at Luna Station, Rebecca transmitted her report to every government, every news network, every scientific institution she could reach. The response was exactly what she expected. Shock, anger, denial, desperation. But as she watched the feeds from Earth, saw the protests and the emergency sessions and the talking heads debating what it all meant, Rebecca noticed something else. Something the Galactic Assembly probably hadn't anticipated. Humans didn't respond well to being told no. The same species that had crawled out of caves and crossed oceans in wooden boats, that had split atoms and walked on their own moon, that had survived plagues and wars and extinctions, wasn't going to accept a closed door as the end of the story. Rebecca requested a meeting with the Pathfinder Initiative 2 days after her return. They were already working on alternatives, she'd heard, already looking for ways around the problem, that if the galaxy wouldn't open its gates, humanity would build new ones. She just hoped they'd build them fast enough. Welding sparks cascaded like miniature stars across the darkness of space, each one a tiny declaration of defiance. Amara Osei watched through the observation window as construction drones assembled the latest prototype jump drive. The thing looked nothing like the elegant gates the Galactic Assembly used. It was crude, bulky, held together with human engineering and pure stubbornness. She loved it. "The calculations still don't make sense," her assistant said, studying the data streams on his tablet. "According to everything we know about physics, this should tear itself apart the moment we activate it." "According to everything the galaxy bothered to teach us about physics," Amara corrected. She pointed at the prototype. "We're not using their rules anymore." 6 months had passed since Rebecca Stone brought news of the quarantine. 6 months of humanity staring at closed doors and deciding to build windows instead. The Pathfinder Initiative had started as a small research project. Now it consumed resources from every nation on Earth, every colony in human space. Desperation made for excellent motivation. Amara had grown up in Accra, studied physics in Mumbai, and earned her doctorate at the Lunar Institute. Everyone told her that faster-than-light travel required exotic matter, pocket dimensions, or technologies humanity wouldn't develop for centuries. The Galactic Assembly had those technologies. Humanity didn't. So Amara stopped trying to copy what the galaxy had and started asking what they'd overlooked. The answer turned out to be surprisingly simple. The galaxy built its jump gates at stable points in space, creating a network of fixed routes that everyone shared. Safe, predictable, controlled. Amara's prototype didn't need stable points. It punched through space wherever the ship happened to be, using principles that made conventional physicists nervous. Dangerous? Absolutely. Reckless? Without question, but it worked. "Final systems check complete," the construction coordinator announced. "We're ready for the test jump whenever you give a word, Dr. Osei." Amara pulled up the tactical display. The test route would take an unmanned probe from Earth orbit to a point beyond Pluto and back. If the probe survived, they'd know the drive could handle the stress. If it didn't, well, they had 17 more prototypes in various stages of construction. "Execute the jump," she ordered. The probe's engines flared. Space seemed to twist around the small vessel. Reality bending in ways that hurt to observe directly. Then the probe vanished. 27 seconds of silence followed. Amara counted each one, her heart hammering against her ribs. The probe reappeared exactly where the calculations predicted, its hull intact, its instruments still functioning. The control room erupted in cheers. Amara allowed herself a smile. One successful jump didn't prove anything except that the prototype wouldn't explode immediately. But it was a start. Admiral Reyes found her in the cafeteria 3 hours later, nursing coffee that had gone cold while she reviewed the test data. "Congratulations," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "You've successfully moved a tin can from point A to point B. Now do it with a ship that can carry 200 people and enough supplies to survive in uncharted space for 6 months." "Good morning to you too, Admiral," Amara replied dryly. Reyes had commanded humanity's defense forces during the brief territorial dispute with the separatist colonies near Alpha Centauri. Now he ran the Pathfinder initiative with the same ruthless efficiency he'd brought to that conflict. He was the kind of man who saw obstacles as targets. "I'm being serious," Reyes continued. "The politicians are getting impatient. They want results. They want to show the galaxy that humanity isn't going to roll over because some crystal-faced bureaucrat told us to stay in our corner. Science doesn't care about political timelines," Amara said. "No, but funding does." Reyes pulled up a holographic display, showing her a ship design she'd never seen before. "This is the Wayfinder. We're converting 3 long-range cargo vessels into deep space exploration ships. They'll be ready in 4 months. I need your drive ready in 3. Amara studied the specs. The ships were massive, designed to operate independently for extended periods. Each one carried manufacturing facilities, hydroponic gardens, and enough fuel to power conventional drives for years. With her FTL system installed, they could go anywhere. The question was where. "The galaxy locked us out of their territory," Reyes explained. "But there's a lot of space they don't control. The fringe, we're calling it. Systems too far from the established jump gate network to be worth their attention. Reports suggest there might be other species out there, ones that never joined the assembly. Or ones the assembly rejected," Amara added quietly. "Exactly." Reyes leaned forward. "We're going to find them, trade with them, learn from them, build our own network in the spaces the galaxy forgot about. And we need ships that can get there." Amara looked at the cold coffee in her cup, then back at the ship design. 3 months to scale up a prototype that had performed exactly one successful test. It was impossible. Then again, everything humanity had accomplished in the past 6 months had been impossible according to someone. "I'll need full access to the shipyards," she said, "and complete authority over the engineering teams. No interference from the oversight committees. Done. And if something goes wrong during testing, if we lose ships or crew members, that's on both of us. I won't be the scapegoat if this fails." Reyes extended his hand. "If this fails, we'll both be too busy running from angry mobs to worry about scapegoats. Do we have a deal?" Amara shook his hand. 3 months. But I'm choosing the test crew personally. I want Rebecca Stone, the cargo captain who brought back the quarantine notice." Reyes looked surprised. "She's been out there," Amara said. "She knows what we're up against. And she's got a reason to make this work." Reyes nodded slowly. "I'll make the arrangements. Welcome to the Pathfinder Initiative, Dr. Osei. Try not to accidentally destroy the solar system while you're saving it." 3 months later, Amara stood in the Wayfinder's engineering bay, watching her jury-rigged FTL drive hum with barely contained power. Rebecca Stone was on the bridge, running final checks before their first real jump into the unknown. The galaxy had shut its gates. Humanity was about to kick down some walls. The stars were wrong, and that meant they'd succeeded. Rebecca checked the navigation display 3 times before accepting what it showed. The Wayfinder had jumped further in 30 seconds than conventional drives could manage in 6 months. They'd left human-controlled space behind entirely, emerging in a region where no human ship had ever traveled. Sensor sweep complete, Tessa Williams announced from the tactical station. The former diplomat had traded negotiating tables for a ship's bridge, and she'd adapted faster than Rebecca expected. I'm reading 7 planetary systems within range. 3 show signs of industrial activity. Industrial activity meant civilization. Civilization meant first contact. Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. Which one looks most promising? She asked. The 4th system has regular energy signatures, organized orbital traffic, and what might be communication broadcasts, Tessa replied. But Captain, there's something else. I'm picking up debris fields consistent with combat. Recent combat. Rebecca frowned. The galaxy had told humanity they were too violent, too unpredictable. Yet here in the fringe, it seemed violence was common enough to leave debris fields floating in orbit. Take us in slow, she ordered. Passive sensors only until we know what we're dealing with. The 4th system revealed itself gradually as the Wayfinder coasted inward. 2 gas giants dominated the outer orbits. A ringed world spun lazily near the habitable zone. And around that world, dozens of stations and ships moved in patterns that suggested an active, spacefaring society. The ships looked nothing like human or assembly vessels. They were angular, brutal, covered in what appeared to be armor plating. Whatever species built them expected trouble. I'm reading weapon signatures on most of those ships, Tessa said quietly. Nothing pointed at us yet, but they're armed for serious combat. Let's introduce ourselves before they decide we're hostile, Rebecca said. Open a channel. All frequencies, all formats. Let's see if anyone's listening. Raymond had prepared a first contact package, mathematical sequences followed by binary representations of basic concepts. Rebecca transmitted it and waited. The response came in less than a minute. A harsh, grating voice spoke in a language Rebecca didn't recognize, but the computer's translation protocols kicked in after analyzing the broadcast. Unknown vessel. Identify yourself and your intentions or be destroyed. Friendly start, Raymond muttered. Rebecca activated the transmission. This is Captain Rebecca Stone of the human vessel Wayfinder. We come in peace, seeking trade and knowledge. We mean no harm to you or your people. Silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Then a new voice came through, deeper and somehow more controlled than the first. Omans, we have no record of your species. What faction do you represent? What territory do you claim? We don't represent any faction, Rebecca said carefully. Our species was recently contacted by the Galactic Assembly and rejected. We're exploring the spaces beyond their territory, looking for others who might be willing to trade and share information. Another pause. Then, unexpectedly, something that might have been laughter. The Assembly rejected you? Then perhaps you're worth talking to after all. We are the Thorn. We too know what it means to be deemed unworthy by those who claim to rule the galaxy. You may approach our primary station, but be warned. Any hostile action will result in your immediate destruction. Tessa looked at Rebecca. Are we really doing this? Approaching an armed station belonging to a species we know nothing about. That's why we're out here, Rebecca replied. Someone has to be first. The primary station loomed larger as they approached, a massive construction of metal and composite materials that dwarfed the Wayfinder. Docking procedures were tense, conducted through a combination of translated instructions and educated guessing. When Rebecca finally stepped through the airlock into the station proper, she got her first look at the Thorn. They stood roughly human height, but built wider, their bodies covered in segmented exoskeletons that gave them their name. For arms, each ending in precise manipulators. Faces that were hard to read, with multiple eyes arranged in ways that suggested they saw in more spectrums than humans did. The one who greeted her wore decorative armor etched with patterns Rebecca assumed indicated rank or status. He spoke through a translation device that rendered his words into passable English. I am Rake, chief engineer of this station. Your arrival is unexpected and, I admit, intriguing. The Assembly quarantined my people 300 cycles ago. We have built our civilization here in the fringe ever since. 300 cycles, Rebecca repeated. What did they quarantine you for? Aggressive expansion, they claimed, Rake said, and Rebecca heard what might have been bitterness in his translated voice. We colonized systems they had marked as reserves. We refused to limit our population according to their quotas. We insisted on maintaining our own military rather than relying on assembly peacekeepers. They called us dangerous and sealed us away from civilized space. They called us emotionally volatile and unpredictable, Rebecca said. Apparently being different is enough to get locked out. Rake's multiple eyes studied her. You have been rejected for mere months, yet you already travel to the fringe seeking allies. Most species take decades to recover from the shame of assembly rejection. How did you manage it? We decided shame was optional, Rebecca replied. If the galaxy won't have us as we are, we'll find or build our own galaxy. Something changed in Rake's posture, a relaxation that Rebecca interpreted as approval. Come, he said. Let me show you what the rejected and quarantined have built in the spaces the assembly abandoned. The tour that followed revealed a thriving civilization that had not only survived exile, but prospered from it. The Thorn had adapted to the fringe, learning to extract resources from systems the assembly considered worthless. They developed technologies that prioritized resilience over elegance, function over form. We're not the only ones here, Rake explained as they walked through a massive hydroponic facility. There are others in the fringe, some rejected like us, some who developed in isolation, some who fled the assembly's control. We maintain trade relations with 17 different species. None of us would be welcome in civilized space. What if I told you that humanity wants to change that? Rebecca said, not by begging the assembly for acceptance, but by building something new, a network of our own. Rake stopped walking. You have been free of the assembly for months. We have been exiled for generations. What makes you think you can succeed where we have merely survived? Rebecca met his multi-eyed gaze steadily. Because we're not trying to survive. We're trying to thrive, and we can't do it alone. But together, the outcasts might be able to build something better than what rejected us. 3 days later, the Wayfinder departed the Thorn Station with a signed trade agreement, detailed star charts of the fringe, and an invitation to return. Rake had also given them something more valuable. Hope that humanity wasn't alone in refusing to accept rejection as final. How many more species do you think are out here? Tessa asked as they plotted their next jump. Rebecca looked at the star charts, at the vast, unexplored regions marked in Rake's data. Enough, she said. Enough to build something the galaxy can't ignore. 2 years could build empires or burn them down, and in the fringe, humanity had chosen to build. Nicole Frost studied the charter document one more time before the signing ceremony. 12 species, each one rejected or ignored by the Galactic Assembly, each one choosing to bind their futures together. The Fringe Alliance, they were calling it. Not a hierarchy, not an empire, but a network of equals. She still couldn't quite believe it was real. Ambassador Frost. Her aide poked his head through the door. They're ready for you. Nicole smoothed down her formal jacket, the one with Earth's flag on the shoulder alongside the new Fringe Alliance symbol. Then she walked into the conference chamber where history was waiting to be made. Representatives from 12 worlds filled the room. Rake sat with the Thorn delegation, his exoskeleton polished to a mirror shine for the occasion. Beside them, the Singing Mothers pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that Nicole's translator rendered as greetings. Others she'd come to know over the past year, species with names like the Veil, the Stone People, and the Drift Collective. All of them outcasts. All of them choosing to stand together. Shall we begin? Nicole asked. The ceremony was brief. Each representative signed the charter in their own way, some with physical marks, others with biometric scans, one species through a complex pattern of electromagnetic pulses. When Nicole added her signature, she felt the weight of it. Earth was binding itself to these species not out of desperation, but out of genuine partnership. It's done, Rake announced when the last signature was recorded. We are no longer isolated survivors. We are an alliance. Celebration followed, though Nicole kept one eye on her communication console. The Galactic Assembly knew about the Fringe Alliance by now. Their observers had been spotted in neutral space, watching the growing cooperation with what Nicole assumed was concern. She wasn't wrong. 3 days after the signing ceremony, an Assembly delegation arrived at the Fringe border. Not a military force, just 2 diplomatic ships requesting permission to observe and report. Nicole granted it, curious what the galaxy would make of what the outcast had built. The observer who came aboard the human coordination station introduced himself as Kelix, a mid-tier bureaucrat from the Assembly's Department of Fringe Affairs. His species looked vaguely aquatic, with skin that shifted between blue and green depending on the light. Ambassador Frost, Kelix said, his translation implant rendering his words with perfect diplomatic neutrality. I must admit, the Assembly is surprised by what you've accomplished here. Surprised that we survived? Nicole asked. We're surprised that we thrived? Both, Kelix admitted. He gestured at the view screen, showing traffic moving through the fringe trade routes. Human ships alongside Thorn vessels, singing Mother Bio ships drifting in formation with Veil stealth craft. The Assembly assumed that species deemed incompatible would either adapt to our standards or fade into irrelevance. This is neither. No, Nicole agreed. We chose a third option. Over the next week, Nicole gave Kelix a complete tour of the Fringe Alliance. He saw human technology integrated with Thorn engineering. He observed joint research stations where species the Assembly had deemed too alien to interact with work side by side, solving problems through cooperation rather than hierarchy. He attended a trade negotiation where 12 different species hammered out agreements without a single dominant power dictating terms. This shouldn't work, Kelix said on his final day, staring at a manufacturing facility where 4 different species collaborated on building a new class of ship. Your species are too different. Your languages, your biology, your fundamental approaches to reality. The Assembly's models predict this level of diversity leads to conflict, not cooperation. Maybe your models are wrong, Nicole suggested. Kelix turned those strange, color-shifting eyes on her. Or maybe the Assembly's insistence on compatibility was never about preventing conflict. Maybe it was about maintaining control. Nicole said nothing, letting the observer reach his own conclusions. Before Kelix departed, he delivered an official message from the Galactic Assembly Council. Nicole read it with growing disbelief, then forwarded it to Rebecca Stone, Admiral Reyes, and every other human leader she could reach. The message was simple. The Assembly was lifting humanity's quarantine. They were offering full membership, complete access to the Gate Network, and a seat on the Junior Council. All humanity had to do was dissolve their agreements with the fringe species and accept Assembly oversight. They're scared, Reyes said during the emergency conference call. They're seeing what we've built out here and realizing it's becoming a rival power structure. It's more than that, Rebecca added from the bridge of the Wayfinder, currently docked at a Thorn station 3 systems away. They're offering us the thing they told us we could never have. Why now? Nicole had her suspicions. Because if we don't take it, we prove that the Assembly's approval isn't worth having. We prove that there's another way to exist in this galaxy. So what do we tell them? Reyes asked. Nicole thought about the past 2 years. The species humanity had met, the friendships formed, the technologies shared. She thought about Rake teaching human engineers how to salvage resources from dead stars. About the singing mothers sharing their understanding of quantum harmonics. About every species in the Fringe Alliance choosing to work together not because anyone forced them to, but because they wanted to. We tell them no, she said firmly. We don't dissolve the Fringe Alliance to join their club. We propose something different. 2 galactic communities coexisting as equals. They keep their gates and their rules. We keep our network and our freedom. And we find ways to cooperate that don't require either of us to abandon what we've built. They won't like that, Reyes warned. They don't have to like it, Nicole replied. They just have to accept that they're not the only game in the galaxy anymore. The official response took 3 weeks to draft, with input from every member of the Fringe Alliance. When it was finally transmitted to the Assembly, Nicole felt a mixture of nervousness and pride. Humanity was turning down membership in the most powerful organization in the known galaxy. They were gambling that what they'd built with the other outcasts was worth more than a seat at the table that had rejected them. The Assembly's response came faster than expected. Not an acceptance, but not an outright refusal either. They proposed a conference-neutral territory to discuss the possibility of what they called the Twin Galaxy Accords. Rake, listening to the transmission alongside Nicole, made a sound that the translator interpreted as approval. They blinked first, the Thorn engineer said. The assembly blinked. I never thought I would see this day. Neither did I, Nicole admitted. But here we are. Outside the station windows, ships from a dozen species moved through space in coordinated patterns, building something new in the spaces the old galaxy had abandoned. The gates were closed, but humanity and its allies had built roads that led everywhere that mattered. The distress call came from a place that shouldn't exist, and it screamed in frequencies that hurt to hear. David Ortiz had commanded the frontier for 8 months, patrolling the deep fringe where even the outcasts rarely traveled. His crew knew how to handle pirates, navigate unstable jump points, and negotiate with species that had never seen humans before. But nothing in his experience prepared him for the message that came through at 0400 hours. IT wasn't words. It wasn't data. It was pure anguish, transmitted across every spectrum the ship's sensors could detect. And beneath it, something else. Something vast moving through space, consuming everything in its path. "Give me Admiral Reyes," David ordered, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his gut. "And someone get Rebecca Stone on the line. She needs to see this." The tactical display showed something impossible. A region of space that simply wasn't there anymore, replaced by an emptiness that made sensors malfunction when they tried to analyze it. And that emptiness was growing, spreading outward at a rate that suggested it would reach inhabited systems within months. "What is it?" his tactical officer asked, her face pale. "I don't know," David admitted, "but it's eating the galaxy." The emergency conference assembled quickly. Representatives from a fringe alliance, human military command, and surprisingly, observers from the Galactic Assembly. Chorus appeared on screen, the crystalline being's usual composure replaced by something that looked like actual fear. "It is called the Hollow," Chorus said without preamble. "Our ancient records speak of it. A weapon from the time before the Assembly, before the current galactic order. Someone appears to have awakened it." "A weapon?" Rebecca demanded from her position aboard the Wayfinder. "That thing is destroying entire solar systems." "Yes," Chorus agreed. "It was designed to consume enemy territory during a war our ancestors barely survived. The Assembly was founded in part to ensure such weapons were never used again. But the Hollow does not care about our agreements or our borders. It moves through real space, not jump space. Our gate network means nothing to it." Admiral Reyes pulled up projections. "According to our calculations, the Hollow will reach Assembly core worlds in 6 months. Fringe Alliance territory in 3. We need to stop it now. The Assembly's military is mobilizing," Chorus said. "But we're designed for peacekeeping operations and border control. We have not fought a war of survival in 11,000 years. Our tactics, our strategies, everything is optimized for the gate network. The Hollow moves through empty space, the very regions we taught ourselves to ignore." Silence fell across the conference. Then Rake spoke up, his translated voice cutting through the tension. "But the Fringe Alliance has not ignored those spaces," the Thorn engineer said. "We have lived in the empty places. We have learned to operate where there are no gates, no established routes. The very skills you deemed incompatible with civilization are what you now need." David saw the realization spread across faces, both human and alien. The galaxy had rejected the fringe species for being too different, too adaptable to chaos, too willing to operate outside established systems. Now those very qualities were the only hope of survival. "We need a combined fleet," Rebecca said decisively. "Assembly firepower combined with fringe mobility. Your weapons and shields with our ability to operate in uncharted space." "The Assembly does not take orders from quarantined species," one of Chorus's colleagues objected. "Then the Assembly can watch as the Hollow consumes your core worlds," Nicole Frost replied coldly. "Because in 3 months, the Fringe Alliance will mount its own defense, with or without you." The debate that followed was heated but brief. When your civilization faces extinction, pride becomes a luxury you can't afford. By the end of the day, an agreement had been hammered out. A joint command structure, shared resources, and most importantly, tactical control given to commanders who understood how to fight in the spaces between the stars. David found himself promoted to Fleet Admiral overnight, leading a combined force that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. His flagship was a modified assembly dreadnought equipped with Fringe Alliance jump drives. His fleet included species that had never fought alongside each other, speaking dozens of languages, following different tactical doctrines that IT should have been chaos. Instead, it became something the galaxy had never seen before. The first engagement with the Hollow happened in a system the Assembly had marked as empty space, worthless territory between productive worlds. David's fleet arrived to find the Hollow consuming a gas giant, breaking it down into energy that fed its incomprehensible appetite. "All units, execute pattern Delta," David commanded. "We're not trying to destroy it. We're trying to slow it down." The fleet scattered into formations that made Assembly tactical officers nervous. Ships jumped in and out of combat range, using the Fringe drives to maintain mobility the Hollow couldn't predict. Assembly weapons fired coordinated barges from angles that shouldn't have been possible with gate-based travel. Thorn engineering allowed ships to operate in the Hollow's disruption field. Human adaptability let commanders improvise when plans failed. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Hollow still existed, but its advance had been halted. More importantly, the fleet had learned how to hurt it. Over the next 2 months, David's combined forces fought a running battle across 17 systems. They lost ships. They lost crew members. But they learned, adapted, and slowly pushed the Hollow back toward the deep spaces where it had originated. And in the research stations behind the front lines, Amara Osei worked alongside Assembly scientists and Fringe Alliance theorists, try to find a permanent solution. "The Hollow isn't alive," Amara explained during a briefing. "It's a self-sustaining reaction, like a fire that feeds on space itself. We need to starve it or contain it. Can you do either?" David asked. Amara smiled grimly. "The Assembly says no. Their models show it's impossible. But their models also said my jump drive couldn't work. Give me 2 weeks and the resources I'm asking for." She got 3 weeks and twice the resources. The result was a device that violated so many established physics principles that Assembly scientists refused to believe it could function. Right up until it did. The final battle happened in a nameless system at the edge of known space. David's fleet held the Hollow in place while Amara's device activated, creating a dimensional pocket that swallowed the ancient weapon hull. When the sensors cleared, the Hollow was gone. Contained, not destroyed, trapped in a prison made from technologies that only existed because outcasts and the civilized had finally worked together. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the containment would hold that IT did. And in that moment, everything changed. Retirement suited Rebecca Stone better than she'd expected, though she spent most of it watching ships that shouldn't exist fly through gates that weren't supposed to be there. From the observation deck of Unity Station, she could see the new reality taking shape. Assembly vessels moved alongside Fringe Alliance ships through hybrid jump gates that combined both technologies. Species that had never spoken to each other before now traded, collaborated, and occasionally argued about the best way to do things. It was messy, complicated, and absolutely beautiful. "Grandmother, why are there 2 different kinds of ships?" The question came from a boy barely 8 years old, Rebecca's grandson, pressing his face against the viewport with the fearless curiosity of someone who'd grown up among the stars. "Because there are 2 different kinds of people," Rebecca answered. "Well, more than 2. Dozens, actually. Hundreds if you count all the species we haven't met yet. But they all use the same gates now," the boy observed. "So why don't they all use the same ships?" Rebecca smiled. That was exactly the question the Galactic Assembly had been asking themselves for the past year, ever since the victory over the Hollow forced them to accept an uncomfortable truth. Uniformity wasn't strength. Diversity was. They used the same gates because they chose to work together, Rebecca explained. But they keep their own ships because being different is valuable. The Assembly learned that the hard way. The Twin Galaxy Accords had taken 6 months to negotiate. Rebecca had attended some of those sessions, watching as representatives from 847 Assembly worlds sat across from delegates from the Fringe Alliance and hammered out a relationship that neither side had imagined possible 3 years earlier. the Assembly hadn't disbanded. They'd simply accepted that they weren't the only way to organize a civilization. The Fringe Alliance maintained its independence, its own networks, its own approaches to problems. But now the two communities shared technology, coordinated on mutual threats, and most importantly, respected each other's right to exist differently. Ambassador Stone, a familiar crystalline face, appeared on the observation deck's communication screen. Chorus looked older somehow, though Rebecca wasn't sure how she could tell with it being made of living crystal. I hope I'm not disturbing your retirement. You know retirement is just a polite fiction, Rebecca replied. What do you need, Chorus? Your daughter, actually, Chorus said. Chancellor Stone has requested that I invite you to the dedication ceremony for the new joint research facility. She thought you would want to see it. Rebecca's daughter had followed her into space, but unlike Rebecca, she'd chosen politics over exploration. Now she represented Earth in the new galactic order, navigating the complex relationship between the Assembly and the Fringe Alliance with a skill that made her mother proud. What kind of research facility? Rebecca asked. The kind that makes our scientists nervous, Chorus admitted, and Rebecca thought she detected amusement in his translated voice. Dr. Osei is leading a team that includes representatives from both the Assembly and the Fringe Alliance. They're exploring what she calls impossible technologies, the kind of research the Assembly banned for 11,000 years because it was deemed too dangerous. Rebecca laughed. Let me guess. Now that those dangerous technologies save the galaxy, everyone wants to study them. Precisely, Chorus said. Your species has a gift for turning our impossibilities into working solutions. The Assembly Council has decided that perhaps our definition of impossible was too narrow. The ceremony 3 days later brought together beings from across known space. Rebecca stood between Rake and Admiral Reyes, watching as Amara Osei unveiled the new facility. It floated in orbit around a star that belonged to neither the Assembly nor the Fringe Alliance, neutral territory where scientists could work without political interference. This facility represents something new, Amara said in her dedication speech. Not Assembly science, not Fringe science. Something we're building together, combining your established knowledge with our willingness to try things you've been afraid to attempt. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to fail spectacularly at times. But we're also going to discover things that neither of our civilizations could have found alone. The applause that followed came from dozens of different species, each expressing approval in their own way. Rebecca noticed Assembly scientists standing beside Fringe researchers, already deep in conversation about their first joint projects. Later at the reception, Chorus approached Rebecca with something that might have been hesitation. I owe you an apology, the crystalline being said quietly. When I delivered the quarantine notice 3 years ago, I believed I was protecting civilization. I was convinced that humanity's differences made you incompatible with the galactic order. You were right, Rebecca said, surprising him. We are incompatible. We refuse to fit into your boxes, follow your rules, or accept that your way was the only way. But you were not wrong to refuse, Chorus continued. The Assembly has spent 11,000 years building a perfect, stable civilization. We eliminated chaos, reduced conflict, created order. But we also eliminated the very things that allowed us to survive the hollow. Adaptability, innovation, the willingness to try what everyone says is impossible. Rebecca sipped her drink, watching her grandson play with a group of thorn children, their forearms making games that human kids struggled to keep up with. So what happens now? Now we learn from each other, Chorus said. The Assembly is modifying its membership criteria. Species will no longer be rejected for being different. And the Fringe Alliance has agreed to share its exploration data, opening up regions of space we've ignored for millennia. We're calling it the Great Opening. The galaxy shut its gates, Rebecca mused, and humanity opened new ones. Now everyone gets to use both. Poetic, Chorus observed, but accurate. Rebecca finished her drink and looked out at the stars, at the ships moving freely between what had once been separate worlds. The quarantine felt like a lifetime ago, a moment of rejection that had seemed like the end of everything. Instead, It had been the beginning. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy or proven themselves superior. They'd simply refused to accept that closed doors meant staying inside forever. They'd built new paths, found allies among the forgotten, and created something the old order couldn't ignore. And in doing so, they'd changed what it meant to be civilized. The galaxy was bigger now, messier, more complicated. Species that had never met before were learning to work together. Technologies that were deemed impossible were being researched openly. The rigid structure of the assembly was loosening, making room for approaches it had rejected for thousands of years. That IT wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still misunderstandings, still species that struggled to accept the changes. But the trend was clear. The galaxy was opening, growing, becoming something new. That Rebecca's grandson ran up to her, breathless with excitement. "Grandmother, Rake's children are teaching me how to build quantum engines. Can we go see their workshop?" Rebecca looked at Quarus, who gestured with what might have been the crystalline equivalent of a smile. "Go ahead," the former assembly enforcer said. "I suspect the young ones will build an even better galaxy than we managed." Rebecca watched her grandson run off with his alien friends, heading toward a future that looked nothing like the past. The gates had closed. New ones had opened. And somewhere in between, the galaxy had learned that the best paths were the ones no one had walked before. That seemed like a good place for a retired cargo captain to end her story.